Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is doing well, inshallah. The fourth moment to be highlighted in the life of our Holy Prophet as one of those moments that many lessons can be learnt from is the Battle of Ahzab, or also known as the Battle of Khandaq. This battle took place in the 5th year after Hijrah, and it carried with it many important lessons, but probably the most important of those lessons was how difficult it was for the Muslimin and the Muslims in that moment, but also how much the Prophet was looking towards the future and how bright he saw the future of the Muslims. So how did this battle come together? This, of course, was after multiple other battles had taken place. The kuffar and the munafiqeen, as well as the mushrikeen, were at a point where they felt like they wanted to come and put an end to the message of the Prophet and to the city of the Prophet, Medina, once and for all. And hence the name Al-Ahzab, the parties, because so many different parties came together, so many different tribes came together to finally put an end to the Prophet. And so the historical narrations tell us that nearly 10,000 troops, they gathered around or outside of the city of Medina. And you have to understand, 10,000 is a huge number. When you're looking at cities like Mecca and Medina, these are not cities that are similar to the cities that we live in today, where sometimes hundreds of thousands or millions of people live. You're talking about cities where the numbers might have been in the thousands, something of that sort. So to have 10,000 come from all over the Arabian Peninsula and unite, and their one common enemy is the Muslims, it created a lot of pressure on the Muslims. And we know that historically the Prophet, he had that consultation with his companions, and of course, according to multiple narrations, Salman came up with the idea of digging the ditch around some of the portions of the city of Medina. So the stage is set now, and the army has come and surrounded Medina. This is extremely difficult time for the Muslims. They are surrounded from the outside. They are being attacked from the outside because of the 10,000 that have come to the gates and the doors of Medina. On the other hand, they have, of course, within Medina, a Jewish tribe who very shortly, as the battle starts to begin, will then betray them and will start to attack them from within. So you have that. And then the third level that you had of difficulty was this severe drought that the Muslims were dealing with. So the narrations tell us that food was extremely scarce at this time. It's very difficult for people to eat. Now imagine you have to dig this ditch, you have to prepare for the army that's coming, and at the same time you barely have the energy to do that because there's not enough food. All of that with the severe and harsh cold that was existent at that time. So all of these different elements are coming together. And yet you find, with all of these difficulties presenting themselves, the Prophet, not only was he patient in that moment, but he also looked further down the road. This long-term vision that the Prophet had was so special, and it was so central to everything that the Prophet did. He never looked at things in terms of where the Muslims are right now. He always looked at where their trajectory is headed. He always looked at where they're going to be many years from now. That is an important lesson for you and I to learn. Anything we put effort into, we should never look at where we're starting at. Because if you look at the Muslims, where are they starting at? They're starting at not even zero. They're not even starting at, square one. They're at a minus, a negative. Here they are in the Battle of Ahzab after years of resisting, but now there's a 10,000 troop army at your door. And within Medina, you also have the Jewish tribe that is ready to attack at any point. And you are hungry, there is a drought and the cold. But the Prophet taught us an important point. You never look at where you are. You always look at where you're headed. And because of that, there was a hope that was built into the heart of these Muslims. Where did this hope present itself and manifest itself fully? Then historical narrations tell us that as they were digging up this ditch, it reached a point somewhere in the ditch where there was a big stone and they could not get around this rock or this stone. And so they started to use the different tools that they had available to them. Some narrations say that they took these tools as a debt from the Jewish tribe that was present in Medina. Nonetheless, whatever they did, they were not able to get through. Eventually, word got to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, we have tried our best. We have done everything that we possibly could, but we are struggling to get through this rock or stone that is remaining. And so the narration says that the Prophet approached the rock or stone. And when he approached the stone, he struck the stone once. And some narration says there was a spark and the stone split a little bit. And then he said takbir. A second time, he did the same thing and a takbir. A third time, a spark and a loud takbir, until finally the stone, it broke open and it cracked open. And when they came to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, why were you saying takbir 3 times? He said, because every time that I struck this stone, what I saw amazed me. And what I saw was one of the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all of you, that one day you would be able to take over the land of Syria. Now, Syria, you have to understand, the Roman Empire and so on and so forth, these were powerful empires that had existed for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years. They had taken on such a type of power that to say that a group of Arab Muslims would be able to come over and take them over would seem nonsensical. But this is the promise that the Prophet gave to them. He said, the second time I struck the stone and there was a spark, I saw that one day you would be taking over Yemen, or what we today know of as Yemen, the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. And the third time that he struck it, he said, I saw that one day you would be taking over the land of Persia. And we know that eventually the Muslims were able to fulfill these dreams and these commands of the Prophet. But the question and the lesson for you and I is this: what can we learn from how the Prophet in this moment is speaking to the Muslims of where their future generations are going to be? One of the important lessons to learn from this is that when you and I do something, you have to remember that sometimes you are laying a foundation. And if you do a good job at what you're doing, sometimes people will come, maybe even after you're gone. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after you're gone, they will continue down that path and they will benefit from the blessings of the work that you did. You don't look at where you are right now. You always look towards the future. You always look in terms of where you are headed. And this was such a difficult dichotomy for the Muslims to wrap their minds around, that the narration says some of the munafiqeen at that point, they said, look at Muhammad. We're struggling to dig this ditch. We barely have food. We're freezing in this cold. And he's telling us that while we're defending Medina, just to make sure no one comes and kills us, that one day we are going to be able to go over and take over Persia and certain parts of the Roman Empire and Yemen and so on and so forth. But this was the lesson that the Prophet taught us. Even if you're at the lowest point, always look at where you are headed, and if your intentions are pure, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed victory. That victory may not come immediately. It might take many generations. But if you're moving in that direction, then the victory is certainly certain.